Andrew Whitmore had spent 25 years turning a small machine shop into one of the largest engineering companies in the United States. At 49, he was known less for his fortune than for the way he conducted business. He remembered employees' names, answered difficult questions without raising his voice, and refused to make promises he could not keep. That reputation had brought him to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where his company was preparing to sign an international partnership with Falkenberg Manufacturing, a respected German producer of industrial robotics. The agreement would allow both companies to build 2 advanced factories in western Pennsylvania and another in Ohio. Thousands of construction workers, engineers, drivers, technicians, and local suppliers would benefit. Several towns that had lost factories over the previous decade were already hoping the project would revive their communities. The final negotiation took place in a private conference room at the Grand Allegheny Hotel. Sunlight entered through tall windows overlooking the river. Coffee steamed in silver pots. Folders lay in perfect rows, and several attorneys waited near the walls. Andrew sat across from Wilhelm Falkenberg, the 62-year-old chairman of the German company. They had met many times and respected each other, but neither spoke the other's language well enough to negotiate technical details. Andrew relied on his chief interpreter, Martin Hale, a polished man in his early 40s, who had worked with him for nearly 6 years. Martin had attended private meetings, traveled on company aircraft, and translated negotiations throughout Europe. Andrew trusted him without hesitation. Working downstairs in the hotel restaurant was 26-year-old Caroline Bennett. Caroline had once expected to become a professional interpreter. Her mother had been an elementary school teacher, and her late grandfather, Conrad, had grown up near Hamburg before immigrating to the United States. He had taught Caroline German when she was a child, beginning with songs and stories, and later moving to newspapers, novels, and business journals. At college, she studied modern languages and international communication. She earned excellent grades and received an invitation to spend a semester in Germany. Then her mother became seriously ill. Caroline left school during her final year to care for her. Medical bills consumed their savings. After her mother died, Caroline remained responsible for the small house they had shared and the debt left behind. She accepted work wherever she could find it. For nearly 2 years, she served breakfasts, carried trays, and cleaned tables at the Grand Allegheny. She never stopped studying. During quiet breaks, she read German newspapers on her phone. At night, she listened to lectures and practiced interpreting political speeches into English. She told herself she would return to college someday, though the promise became harder to believe each month. That afternoon, the restaurant manager asked Caroline to deliver coffee and mineral water to the international delegation. She entered the conference room quietly. The discussion continued while she placed cups beside each guest. Wilhelm was speaking in German about labor protections at the new factories. Caroline understood every word. "Our board remains committed to the employment guarantees discussed in Munich," Wilhelm said. "We will support the partnership provided that permanent workers receive the agreed health benefits, safety protections, and retraining opportunities." Martin translated without hesitation. "Chairman Falkenberg says their board will proceed only if Whitmore Engineering accepts additional financial obligations, including full responsibility for future labor costs and unexpected production delays." Andrew's expression changed. "That was not our agreement," he said. Martin translated his answer into German. Caroline heard him alter that statement too. Instead of saying Andrew believed the demand was new, Martin told Wilhelm that Andrew considered the German company's labor expectations unreasonable and outdated. A quiet tension spread through the room. Caroline nearly dropped the spoon in her hand. She glanced at Martin, wondering whether he had made an unusual mistake. Professional interpreters sometimes misunderstood long sentences, especially when speakers used technical language. But Martin's voice remained calm. His translation had not been uncertain. It had been deliberate. Caroline moved slowly toward the door. Behind her, Wilhelm responded that his company had no intention of weakening the agreement. Martin told Andrew that the Germans were threatening to withdraw unless they received greater control of the factories. Andrew leaned back, clearly offended. Caroline stepped into the hallway, but she did not leave. The door remained partly open, and she listened as another sentence was changed, then another. The mistranslations were pushing two honorable men toward conflict. Caroline's hands began to tremble. If she interrupted, she could lose her job. The hotel served wealthy and influential guests, and employees were forbidden from interfering in private meetings. Her manager had warned everyone that a single complaint could lead to dismissal. Yet if she remained silent, the partnership might collapse. Thousands of people could lose opportunities because one man was poisoning every sentence. Caroline looked at the closed-service elevator, took a slow breath, and remembered something her grandfather had told her. A language is not only a collection of words. It is a bridge. Anyone trusted to stand on that bridge must never move the road beneath another person's feet. She turned around and walked back toward the conference room. Inside the room, Andrew had placed his pen beside the unsigned contract. "I cannot approve an agreement that changes every time we discuss it," he said. Wilhelm heard Martin's German translation and stared at Andrew in disbelief. "Our position has not changed," Wilhelm replied. Martin faced Andrew. "He says the changes are final. His board will not negotiate further." Andrew's attorney, Rebecca Sloan, opened another folder and whispered that they should suspend the meeting. Across the table, the German executives began speaking among themselves. Their voices were controlled, but their frustration was obvious. Martin quietly gathered several pages, as though the collapse of the negotiation were simply another business inconvenience. That was when the door opened. Caroline stepped inside. Every face turned toward her. She wanted to speak, but fear tightened her throat. The security officer near the wall moved forward. "Miss, you cannot enter during a private session." Caroline looked past him at Andrew. "Your translator is lying." The room became completely still. Martin's face lost its color for only a moment. Then he laughed sharply. "This employee has no idea what she is talking about." The security officer reached for Caroline's arm. Andrew raised one hand. "Wait." Caroline's heart pounded so loudly that she could barely hear him. Andrew studied her. She was pale, frightened, and still wearing the hotel's dark blue apron. Nothing about her suggested that she wanted attention. She looked like someone who wished she were anywhere else. "What exactly do you believe was translated incorrectly?" he asked. Martin stepped between them. "Andrew, this is absurd. We are discussing complex legal and engineering terms. She probably recognized a few common German words and misunderstood the rest." Caroline forced herself to continue. "Chairman Falkenberg did not demand that your company accept new labor costs. He said his board remained committed to the employee protections already discussed in Munich. He mentioned health benefits, workplace safety, and retraining. He said they would support the partnership if those agreements remained unchanged." Andrew looked at Wilhelm, then at Martin. Martin shook his head. "She is guessing." Caroline turned toward Wilhelm and spoke in German. "Sir, would you please repeat your last statement slowly? I will translate it, and anyone else may verify whether I am accurate." Wilhelm's eyebrows rose. He answered Caroline in German, asking where she had learned the language. "My grandfather was German," she replied. "I also studied interpretation at university." The German delegation exchanged surprised glances. Andrew's attorney opened her laptop. "We have a certified interpreter on standby in Washington," Rebecca said. "She was assigned to review the final written contract. We can bring her into the meeting by video." Martin's confidence finally weakened. "That is unnecessary. We are wasting valuable time because of a waitress." Andrew did not look away from him. Then verification should clear this up quickly. Rebecca contacted the independent interpreter, Dr. Evelyn Price, a retired diplomat who specialized in German commercial law. Within minutes, Evelyn appeared on the conference screen. Andrew explained that there was a disagreement about several translations. He asked Wilhelm to repeat his statement exactly as before. Wilhelm spoke. Caroline listened and translated. "My company does not seek authority over your factories. We ask only that the protections already promised to workers remain in the final agreement. We believe a partnership that sacrifices employees for short-term profit will eventually fail both financially and morally." Evelyn translated the same statement. Her wording differed slightly, but the meaning was identical. Everyone looked at Martin. He adjusted his tie. One sentence was misunderstood. The chairman spoke quickly. "And the room has poor acoustics." Caroline swallowed. It was not one sentence. Martin's eyes hardened. Andrew leaned forward. "How many?" "At least 7 since I entered with the coffee. Possibly more before that." Rebecca immediately began reviewing the meeting recording. The hotel had provided audio equipment for legal documentation, and every statement since the morning had been preserved. Wilhelm asked Caroline to explain another disputed exchange. She did. Evelyn confirmed her interpretation. Then another sentence was played. Martin had told Andrew that Falkenberg Manufacturing wanted majority control of the American facilities. In reality, Wilhelm had proposed an equal oversight committee with representatives from both companies and the local workforce. Another recording revealed that Martin had transformed a promise to share environmental technology into a demand for exclusive ownership of patents. A fourth showed him telling the German delegation that Andrew planned to replace union workers with temporary contractors, though Andrew had said the opposite. The room's frustration changed into alarm. This was no pattern of careless mistakes. Each false translation had created suspicion. Each one had moved the companies closer to abandoning the agreement. Martin walked toward the door. The security officer blocked his path. Andrew's voice remained quiet. "Sit down." For the first time that afternoon, Martin looked afraid. The meeting was suspended while hotel security and Andrew's corporate investigators were called. Martin surrendered his phone and laptop after Rebecca explained that destroying evidence would create additional legal consequences. Caroline stood near the wall, uncertain whether she was still needed. Andrew asked her to remain. "You heard the conversation that exposed this," he said. "We may need your statement." The restaurant manager arrived a few minutes later. His name was Dennis Cole, and he had supervised Caroline since her first week at the hotel. He entered with an angry expression, prepared to apologize for his employee's behavior. Then Rebecca quietly told him what had happened. Dennis looked from Caroline to Martin and seemed unable to speak. "You interrupted because you understood them?" he finally asked. Caroline nodded. "I knew it was against hotel policy." Dennis removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead. "Hotel policy does not require you to watch a crime happen." The comment brought a brief moment of relief to the tense room. Investigators copied Martin's devices, while Evelyn reviewed the recording with Caroline and the German delegation. The review took more than an hour. By the end, they identified over a dozen significant distortions. Some favored Andrew's company, while others favored Falkenberg Manufacturing. At first, that inconsistency confused everyone. Then Rebecca understood the purpose. "He was not helping one side," she said. "He was making each side believe the other was dishonest." Andrew looked at Martin. "Why?" Martin remained silent. The answer began to emerge from his messages. A competing corporation, Ormond Industrial Systems, had spent years attempting to enter the European robotics market. The Whitmore-Falkenberg partnership would make that far more difficult. Ormond's executives knew they could not outbid the combined companies or defeat the agreement through ordinary competition. Instead, an intermediary contacted Martin. He had been promised several $1 million, a position overseas, and protection from prosecution if he quietly destroyed the relationship before the contract was signed. His task was not to mistranslate every sentence. That would have been discovered quickly. He was instructed to change only the most sensitive statements, especially those involving control, labor, intellectual property, and financial risk. For months, he had altered private conversations in small ways. Each change seemed believable, because international negotiations often involved disagreement. Andrew and Wilhelm had both sensed growing tension, but neither suspected the man they trusted to carry their words. Martin had also forwarded confidential documents to Ormond. The partnership was closer to collapse than anyone had realized. Federal authorities were contacted. Martin was escorted from the hotel while investigators prepared a broader case against the competing corporation. As the door closed behind him, Andrew felt no satisfaction. Betrayal by an enemy was painful, but betrayal by a trusted colleague carried a different weight. Martin had eaten at his home, met his family, and represented his voice in rooms where Andrew could not understand what was being said. Wilhelm walked around the table and offered his hand. "We were both deceived," he said through Evelyn. "The important question is what we do after learning the truth." Andrew shook his hand. "We begin again." The contract was set aside. Both legal teams agreed to review every paragraph using 2 independent interpreters. No one rushed. No one attempted to protect pride. Caroline was invited to sit near Evelyn during the review. At first, she resisted. "I am not certified," she said. "I should not take responsibility for legal language." Evelyn smiled. "That is the first thing a responsible interpreter says. Stay and observe." For the next several hours, Caroline listened as Evelyn and another interpreter compared terminology. When the German lawyers used a regional expression that Evelyn found unusual, Caroline quietly recognized it from her grandfather's speech. Her explanation helped clarify the sentence. Wilhelm asked her questions about American workplace culture. Andrew asked the German delegation to explain their training system in greater detail. Without Martin's interference, both sides discovered that many apparent disagreements had never existed. They also found real differences, but those differences could be discussed honestly. By early evening, the agreement had been corrected and expanded. It protected workers, divided authority fairly, preserved intellectual property rights, and created a scholarship program for students entering technical careers. Andrew signed first. Wilhelm signed next. No one applauded immediately. The moment felt too serious for celebration. Then Wilhelm stood and said in English, with a heavy accent, "Today, we did not only sign a contract, we repaired a bridge." Caroline lowered her eyes, thinking of her grandfather. Outside the hotel, the city lights reflected across the river. Workers in nearby towns had no idea how close the project had come to disappearing. They would never know that a young waitress carrying coffee had helped save it. After the delegation left, Caroline returned to the restaurant. The dinner service had already begun. She tied her apron, collected a tray, and started clearing a table beside the windows. Her hands still shook, but familiar work helped settle her thoughts. She expected Dennis to call her into his office. Even though he had defended her in the conference room, she had disrupted a private meeting, ignored security instructions, and spoken directly to one of the hotel's most important guests. Large hotels valued order. Caroline assumed the management company would decide that keeping her created too much risk. She was polishing a water glass when Andrew entered the restaurant. Without his attorneys and executives around him, he looked older. The confidence remained, but betrayal had left a visible weariness in his face. Caroline placed the glass down. "Mr. Whitmore, I am sorry about the way I entered. I did not know how else to stop the signing. You do not owe me an apology." He asked whether they could sit. Dennis guided them to a quiet table near the back. Andrew thanked Caroline, but she tried to dismiss what she had done. Dr. Price would have discovered the problem when she reviewed the written agreement. "Perhaps," Andrew said, "but Martin was influencing the conversation, not only the document. We might have ended the meeting before she was called." Caroline looked at the table. "I almost walked away. What made you return?" She told him about her grandfather and his belief that interpreters stood on a bridge between people. She explained that he had lost relatives during the war because fear, propaganda, and deliberate lies had divided neighbors. He taught her that mistranslation was not always an innocent error. In the wrong hands, words could become weapons. Andrew listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked why she was working at the hotel instead of interpreting professionally. Caroline hesitated. She disliked explaining her life to strangers, because sympathy often made her feel smaller. Still, Andrew had trusted her in the conference room. She told him about leaving college to care for her mother, the medical debt, and the tuition she could no longer afford. She admitted that she continued studying alone, but had begun to believe her career had passed beyond reach. "How much of your degree remains?" 2 semesters, along with the certification examinations. Andrew nodded slowly. His charitable foundation funded engineering scholarships, community colleges, and workforce training. It had never supported language studies, but the day had shown him how much depended on people who could carry meaning accurately between cultures. "I would like the foundation to pay for your remaining education," he said. Caroline stared at him. "I cannot accept that as payment for what happened." "It is not payment. It feels like a reward." "No," Andrew said. "A reward would be a check given, because you helped me once. This would be an investment in work you could do for thousands of people over many years." Caroline still looked uncertain. Andrew continued. "You protected a partnership because you believed truth mattered, even when no one had given you authority. Education will not create that character in you. You already have it. Education will give it a place to serve." Dennis stood several feet away, pretending to inspect a reservation book. His eyes had filled with tears. Caroline asked for time to think. Andrew smiled. "Take all the time you need. The offer will remain." Later that night, she returned to the small house she had shared with her mother. Unopened bills sat beside the kitchen sink. Her college textbooks remained in boxes in the spare room. She opened one and found a handwritten note from her mother. "You did not abandon your dream. You paused it to love someone. A dream built on love can wait without dying." Caroline sat on the floor for a long time. The following morning, she called Andrew's foundation. She accepted the scholarship under one condition. Someday, when she was financially able, she would help another student whose education had been interrupted by family hardship. Andrew agreed. Within weeks, Caroline re-enrolled at Allegheny International University. She continued working weekend shifts at the hotel, not because the scholarship required it, but because she wanted to pay her household expenses herself. Her return to school was not easy. She was older than many classmates. Academic routines felt unfamiliar, and grief often returned when she passed places her mother had once visited. Yet she carried something she had not possessed during her first years at university. She knew exactly why her work mattered. Professor Samuel Reed became Caroline's most demanding mentor. He was a former diplomatic interpreter with a soft voice and unforgiving standards. On her first day in his advanced course, he played a complicated German statement and asked Caroline to interpret it without notes. She translated the meaning accurately but improved the speaker's awkward phrasing. Professor Reed stopped her. "You made him sound wiser than he sounded. I was trying to make the sentence clear. Clarity is not permission to replace a person's voice with your own." The criticism embarrassed her, but she understood its importance. Martin had committed an extreme betrayal, yet smaller violations could begin with the belief that an interpreter knew what a speaker should have said. Professor Reed taught his students to preserve uncertainty, hesitation, humor, anger, and even mistakes. Their duty was not to make people impressive, it was to make them understood. Caroline studied contract law, engineering vocabulary, ethics, and simultaneous interpretation. She practiced until headaches forced her to stop. She recorded herself, examined every error, and began again. Evelyn Price visited the university several times as a guest lecturer. She remembered Caroline and became another mentor. "Courage brought you into that conference room," Evelyn told her. "Discipline will determine whether people can trust you in the next one." Caroline graduated with distinction and passed her certification examinations. At the ceremony, Dennis sat beside Andrew and Rebecca. Professor Reed presented Caroline with an award for excellence in interpretation ethics. After graduation, Andrew offered her a position at Whitmore Engineering. She declined. "I am grateful," she said, "but I do not want my career to depend on the man whose scholarship paid for my education." Andrew was pleased rather than offended. "That may be the best reason anyone has ever given me for refusing a job." Caroline joined an independent interpretation agency in Washington. Her first assignments were modest: training seminars, medical equipment demonstrations, and regional business meetings. During one early conference, a senior executive complained that she translated too slowly. Caroline calmly explained that the speaker had used an ambiguous term and that accuracy required clarification. The executive threatened to request another interpreter. Her supervisor supported her. The clarification revealed that the company had confused two safety standards. Correcting the mistake prevented expensive equipment from being installed incorrectly. Caroline's reputation grew. Several years later, she interpreted negotiations involving hospitals, labor unions, environmental agencies, and international manufacturers. She became respected not because she spoke the most dramatically, but because people trusted that she would not add, remove, soften, or sharpen meaning for personal advantage. Meanwhile, the Whitmore-Falkenberg partnership transformed several struggling communities. The first factory opened outside Pittsburgh. The second rose near Youngstown, Ohio, on land where an abandoned industrial complex had stood for years. Workers received advanced training, stable benefits, and opportunities to earn engineering certifications. Andrew often visited the facilities without announcing his arrival. He ate in the employee cafeteria and listened to concerns from technicians and maintenance crews. The betrayal had changed him. He did not become suspicious of everyone, but he stopped confusing familiarity with proof of reliability. All international meetings now used two interpreters for major decisions. Important statements were confirmed in writing, and employees were encouraged to question anything unclear. Some executives complained that the process consumed time. Andrew answered, "Misunderstanding is more expensive than patience." The criminal investigation into Ormond Industrial Systems continued for several years. Evidence from Martin's devices revealed bribery, stolen documents, and attempts to sabotage other partnerships. Several executives were convicted. Martin cooperated with authorities and received a reduced sentence, though his professional career was over. Caroline followed the case from a distance. She felt no pleasure at his downfall. Once, she asked Evelyn why someone with Martin's education and opportunities would destroy his own life. "People rarely betray trust in one enormous step," Evelyn said. "They cross a small line, explain it to themselves, and then cross another. Eventually, they can no longer remember where honesty ended." That answer stayed with Caroline. She began volunteering at a community language center on Saturday mornings. Many students were immigrants preparing for job interviews or citizenship examinations. Others were young people who hoped to become interpreters but could not afford private training. One student, Sofia Ramirez, had left college to care for her younger brothers after their father disappeared. Caroline recognized the exhaustion behind Sofia's determination. She helped Sofia apply for assistance through Andrew's foundation. The promise Caroline had made years earlier was beginning to take shape. Nearly 8 years after the hotel meeting, Caroline returned to Pittsburgh for the opening of the Whitmore-Falkenberg Institute for Language and Industrial Cooperation. The institute occupied a renovated brick building near the river. It offered technical language courses, ethics training, apprenticeships, and scholarships for students whose education had been interrupted by illness, poverty, military service, or family responsibility. Andrew and Wilhelm had funded the project together. Caroline had helped design the interpreter training program, but she refused to let the institute carry her name. She argued that it should represent a shared mission rather than one person's story. On opening day, the main hall filled with business leaders, factory workers, teachers, students, and families. Large windows faced the same river Caroline had seen from the hotel years earlier. Sophia stood among the first group of scholarship recipients. She had returned to college and planned to specialize in Spanish, English, and German medical interpretation. Dennis, now retired from hotel management, attended with his wife. Professor Reed sat in the front row beside Evelyn. Wilhelm spoke first. His English had improved, though he still preferred an interpreter for formal remarks. Caroline translated beside him. He described the day the partnership nearly collapsed and praised the unknown hotel employee who had prevented distrust from becoming permanent. Then Andrew approached the podium. He did not speak about revenue, factories, or awards. He spoke about listening. For much of my career, he said, I believed leadership meant being the person with the best information. That afternoon taught me something different. Leadership also means recognizing that important truth may come from someone with no title, no invitation, and no protection. Caroline interpreted his words into German for the guests. Andrew continued. We create dangerous rooms when only powerful people are permitted to interrupt. Every institution needs a way for the quietest person to say, something is wrong, without being punished for caring. After the ceremony, a young student named Noah Green approached Caroline. He was 19 and had grown up in a former steel town. His father had recently lost his hearing after an industrial accident, inspiring Noah to study both German and American Sign Language. Were you really not afraid when you entered that meeting? He asked. Caroline laughed gently. I was terrified. But everyone tells the story as though you knew exactly what to do. Stories become cleaner after many years. Real courage is usually messy. Your hands shake. Your voice sounds wrong. You imagine every possible consequence. Then how did you do it? I decided that fear could come with me, but it could not make the decision. Noah considered her answer. My father says people did not listen when he first reported that the machine was unsafe. Caroline looked toward the factory workers gathered nearby. Then your father understands why this institute exists. During the following months, Caroline taught a seminar called The Weight of Another Person's Words. She used fictional case studies rather than the hotel incident. Students examined situations where interpreters faced pressure from executives, government officials, doctors, relatives, and attorneys. She taught them that accuracy was not passive. It required preparation, humility, and the courage to admit uncertainty. One afternoon, Noah asked whether an interpreter should ever refuse to translate. Caroline answered that refusal could be necessary if someone demanded intentional deception, asked the interpreter to conceal a conflict of interest, or placed another person in immediate danger. But we must be careful, she added. We are not judges of every speaker. People have the right to express ideas we dislike. Our responsibility is to carry their meaning honestly, not to control it. Outside the classroom, Andrew faced another test of those principles. A newly appointed factory director attempted to hide safety complaints to protect production targets. A maintenance worker named Leonard Brooks reported the problem through the company's independent ethics system. The investigation confirmed Leonard's warning. Production was stopped for several days, and damaged equipment was replaced before anyone was injured. Some board members complained about the financial loss. Andrew invited Leonard to speak at the next leadership meeting. Years ago, a person without authority saved this company from a dishonest interpreter, Andrew told the board. Today, another person without authority saved our employees from a dishonest report. We will never punish the voice that protects us from our own blindness. Leonard was later promoted to safety coordinator. The story spread through the factories, reinforcing a culture that no written policy could create by itself. Caroline understood then that her decision in the hotel had become larger than a single contract. It had changed the kind of company Andrew wanted to lead. Time moved quietly. Andrew entered his 60s and began transferring daily leadership to a younger executive team. His hair turned silver, and he no longer traveled across several countries in a single week. He spent more time at the Institute, where students treated him less like a billionaire and more like an unusually curious grandfather. Caroline became Director of Professional Ethics at the Institute, while continuing to interpret selected international negotiations. She preferred difficult assignments involving communities whose voices were often ignored. She worked during hospital partnerships, disaster recovery projects, and labor discussions. In each room, she remembered the hotel door and the moment before she entered. Sophia became a medical interpreter and later created a program for immigrant families navigating children's hospitals. Noah specialized in technical and sign language interpretation, helping deaf engineers participate fully in international conferences. Professor Reed retired, though he still attended Caroline's lectures, and corrected her whenever he thought she simplified an ethical question too much. Evelyn passed away after a brief illness. At her memorial, Caroline received a small envelope. Inside was Evelyn's old interpreter's notebook and a handwritten message. "Courage opens the door. Competence keeps it open for others." Caroline placed the note in her office. The partnership between Whitmore Engineering and Falkenberg Manufacturing survived economic downturns, political disputes, and changes in technology. Not every year was profitable. Not every negotiation was friendly. Yet the companies continued because their relationship had been rebuilt around verification rather than assumption. On the 20th anniversary of the agreement, Andrew and Wilhelm returned to the Grand Allegheny Hotel. The conference room had been renovated, but the windows still overlooked the river. The original table had been replaced. The service door through which Caroline had entered remained in the same place. The hotel organized a private dinner for former participants and institute graduates. Dennis attended in a wheelchair, cheerful and stubbornly independent. Rebecca Sloan, now retired from corporate law, brought the original unsigned contract that Martin had nearly persuaded Andrew to approve. She placed it inside a glass display case for the institute. Caroline examined Andrew's pen mark where he had begun to sign before stopping. Only a small line appeared on the paper. "That is how close we came," Andrew said. Caroline shook her head. "That line is not the important part." "What is?" "You stopped when someone challenged what you believed." Andrew smiled. "Many leaders would say you gave me no choice. You had choices. Security was already moving toward me." They stood near the window while younger interpreters talked around them. Andrew admitted that he had often wondered what would have happened if Caroline had remained silent. The contract might have collapsed. The factories might never have been built. Or worse, the companies might have signed a poisoned agreement and spent years blaming each other for promises neither had made. Caroline said she had wondered too, but she no longer believed the value of her decision could be measured only by the partnership. Even if the contract had failed for another reason, she said, speaking was still necessary. The outcome does not create the morality of the choice. Andrew considered that. So courage is valuable even when it does not win. Especially then. If we speak only when success is guaranteed, that is strategy, not courage. At dinner, Dennis revealed something he had never told Caroline. The day before the meeting, another server had complained that Martin behaved strangely while making a private phone call. Dennis dismissed the concern because the server had no evidence and Martin appeared important. "I kept thinking important people must have important reasons," Dennis said. After Caroline spoke, "I realized how easily uniforms, titles, and expensive clothes can influence whom we believe." He apologized to the former server years later. That confession deepened the evening's meaning. Caroline had not been the first person to notice something wrong. She had simply been the one who crossed the final distance between suspicion and action. Before leaving, the group entered the conference room one last time. No speeches had been planned, but the students asked Caroline to say something. She stood beside the service door, looking at faces from different countries and generations. Then she began to speak. "When I entered this room many years ago, I thought courage meant not being afraid," Caroline said. "I know now that courage is often the decision to act while fear remains fully present." She looked toward the young interpreters. "Some of you will work in rooms where powerful people speak loudly and confidently. You may believe your duty is small because you are not the person making the decision, but no honest duty is small when other lives depend on it." She explained that Martin's betrayal had taught them the obvious danger of deliberate lies, but life's more common failures were quieter. People remained silent because they did not want to appear difficult. They repeated rumors because checking facts required effort. They accepted unclear instructions because asking questions might reveal ignorance. They allowed respected people to go unchallenged because status was mistaken for character. Andrew listened from the front row. Caroline continued. "As we grow older, we learn that harm does not always arrive with cruelty on its face. Sometimes it arrives as convenience. It says, 'Do not interrupt. Do not embarrass anyone. Do not risk your position. Someone else will handle it.' Those thoughts sound reasonable. That is why they are dangerous." She spoke of her mother, who had once worried that Caroline had sacrificed her future by leaving school. With time, Caroline understood that life was not a straight road, where every delay became failure. Caring for her mother had not destroyed her dream. It had deepened the person who would later pursue it. Many adults carry regret because their lives did not unfold according to the schedule they imagined when they were young, she said. They believe an unfinished education, a lost job, an illness, a failed business, or years spent caring for family have placed them permanently behind. But a meaningful life is not measured by arriving first. Sometimes the years that seem to interrupt our purpose are the years preparing us to understand it. Her knowledge of German had opened the conference room door, but grief had taught her to recognize what was at stake. Service work had taught her to observe without being noticed. Financial hardship had taught her that thousands of jobs were not abstract statistics. They were rent, medicine, groceries, dignity, and hope inside ordinary homes. Nothing had been wasted. She turned toward Andrew. And power alone did not save the agreement. A powerful man had to become humble enough to stop, listen, and verify. Speaking truth matters, but so does creating a world where truth can be heard. Andrew lowered his head. Caroline told the students not to confuse trust with blindness. Trust did not mean refusing to verify. Honest verification protected good people as much as it exposed dishonest ones. Questions asked respectfully were not insults. Admitting uncertainty was not weakness. Slowing down to understand another person was not wasted time. She also warned them against believing that one courageous act made a person permanently brave. Every day gives us smaller choices, whether to correct a false story, whether to admit an error before it grows, whether to defend someone who is absent, whether to listen to a worker, a child, a stranger, or an elderly person whom others overlook. Character is not stored from one heroic moment, it is renewed through ordinary decisions. The room remained silent. Caroline looked at the service door behind her. Years earlier, she had believed that door separated two worlds, the people who carried trays and the people who shaped industries. She now understood that dignity did not recognize such divisions. A job title described responsibility, not human worth. Wisdom could wear an expensive suit, a factory helmet, a nursing uniform, or a waitress's apron. No one in this room will always have influence, she said. Age changes us. Careers end. Wealth moves from one hand to another. Recognition fades. What remains is the effect our choices had on people who may never know our names. She thought of workers who had built homes with wages from the new factories, patients helped by Sophia, engineers represented by Noah, and families who would never hear how close a partnership had come to destruction. That was the quiet nature of goodness. Its greatest results were often invisible to the person who began them. When the moment comes, Caroline concluded, you may not feel ready. Your voice may shake. You may stand alone. Speak carefully anyway. Listen humbly anyway. Tell the truth without cruelty, and receive it without pride. A single honest voice cannot solve every problem, but it can prevent a lie from becoming the foundation on which many lives are built. Andrew rose slowly, followed by Wilhelm, Dennis, Rebecca, and the students. No one applauded at first. They simply stood together in the room where mistrust had once nearly won. Then Andrew began to clap. The sound spread until it filled the room, passed through the open service door, and echoed down the hallway. Caroline smiled, not because she believed the applause belonged to her, but because the truth that once entered through that door was still moving forward through others.